Burnt Bridge, a sober podcast. I am Bridget, and I'm your host. And today we're going to talk about my story with alcoholism, which is so I love reminiscing on the worst times of my life. But first and foremost, we are going to dedicate this episode to a few subscribers who are celebrating sobriety milestones this week. So we'll start with Jenna, who on June 6th is celebrating 6 entire months, which is huge. That is literally half a year. If you guys didn't know, it is. So amazing job, Jenna. We're so proud of you. Caitlin is celebrating 2 months, 60 entire days on June 7th, and Chelsea is celebrating 4 years on June 9th. That's unfathomable. You guys are incredible, and let's all take a moment in the comments and celebrate these ladies on the hardest thing that anyone can do, in my humble opinion. So let's just jump right into it. I wanted my first episode to be my story so that you guys can kind of know where I'm coming from, I guess. So yeah, we'll just get started. I was born to a really loving and amazing family in Mobile, Alabama on May 15th of 1996. And when I was a young child, I was really, really fearful. I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety, which would later be diagnosed as OCD when I was 8 and put on medication at that point. There were some things that happened in my childhood that I won't get super into, but that really further instilled that fear into me and made it really hard for me to I didn't really have the carefree childhood that some people do get to have. And I learned from a very early age that I might need to have another substance, aka an antidepressant, anti-anxiety, to be able to function in this world. Which, when I started taking Zoloft at 8, it absolutely changed my life and helped so much. But it also, I don't know, it's a tricky situation, obviously. So basically, all of that to say, growing up in childhood and adolescence, fear, anxiety, OCD were big components of my existence, to the point where I didn't feel like I fit in really anyway. Anywhere I went, I just thought, I am not experiencing this in the same way I think other people are. I think it's much more miserable in my brain than maybe someone else's, which, whether or not that's true, I'm not sure. That's just how I felt. So when I was in high school, I think I was 14 or 15 when I tried alcohol for the first time. And I remember I will never forget the feeling of the time that I got drunk for the first time. It was for the first time in my life, my thoughts got quiet, and I felt like I was living in a mental world that was more similar to what I observed other people having that experience, if that makes sense. And it just shut the thoughts up, and I was able to be more carefree and be more sociable, and all the things that I felt my mental state were holding me back from, alcohol allowed me to do and be that way, if that makes sense. So very quickly I decided I'd like to do this at any possible opportunity. Thank you so much. So throughout high school and college, I would party pretty hard, but in a kind of a weird way, because I loved to get really drunk with a small group of people. I didn't really like going to bars, clubs, because I wanted to get drunk and talk about my feelings and share deep stories with people. I didn't want to get drunk and dance. I wanted to get drunk and cry. So it's confusing, because it's I wanted to escape my feelings, but then also I kind of wanted to experience them more, but in a way that felt controlled and safer, which is, of course, the opposite of what it actually was. But I knew that my relationship to alcohol was different than what I was observing my friends and the people around me, because I would always just want to go home and then continue to drink at home, kind of a thing. So my senior year of college, I ended up moving away from my college town, and I lived in Austin here, which was 30 minutes away, and I was commuting to school. And at this time, I was in a relationship with my on again, off again high school sweetheart. And we had been living together, and he had decided to move away and while I was finishing school. So I was living alone, and then with a roommate part of that year as well. But that's when I started drinking every single night, and I started using alcohol as like kind of a sleep aid at that point as well, and to just basically get me through the year. I was like, okay, I'll graduate, I'll go move, I'll get a big girl job, I'll go move, and then I will stop drinking this way. I just need to like basically bide my time until then. Little did I know I would never stop drinking that way ever again until I got sober. So I was drinking to blackout every single night, but like in my home. And when I graduated college, I was like, okay, great. Things are going to be different. Amazing. Perfect. Whatever. I got my first job, moved back up to Dallas. And then my first job was, not great, to be honest. And I was like, okay, well, I think I just need to move to where my boyfriend is. I just need to get through this first year of a job, get this on my resume, whatever. That's when I started drinking at lunchtime. So I was drinking every night, and then I would also go to lunch at my corporate job and literally have a bottle of Sauvignon Blanc every lunchtime, and then come back to work and just be like, hello, like in a much better mood. And then I would die, throughout the day, and just be like, oh my God, please get me out of here. And then 5 o'clock, boom, I'm gone, and I'm going home to get drunk. And once again, I thought, okay, when I move up to be with my boyfriend, like things will be different, whatever. So eventually I move up to Tulsa, Oklahoma to be with my then boyfriend. And this was January of 2020. Let's all hold space for what we know is about to happen. Someone hold my finger. Anyway, so I move up there. We were actually living in a trailer with no running water for a time, which is like before we got our apartment, which for him was like fine because he was like into that kind of stuff. For me, I mean, obviously that's not what I wanted to do, but I did it because I was like, whatever. And also I was hammered 24/7, so didn't really matter. So I got a job up there, started going to that job, and we finally moved into our apartment. I'm still drinking at lunch. I'm sometimes drinking a White Claw before I go into work at like 8 a.m. in the morning. Because in my brain, I was like, here's the thing. I need this to get to everyone else's baseline normal. So like if I just have 1 or 2 White Claws, that's going to bring me to the level of like non-anxiety that I think other people are starting at. And in my brain, that made total sense. I was like, I've found this medicine that works for me. So like if you guys were to drink in the morning, that would be crazy. But you guys don't have the same brain that I have because I'm very unique and I need it. That's what we're doing. Anyways, so, I'm drinking sometimes in the morning, sometimes, not some, but every single night for sure. And I was like, okay, when I get settled, it was always when this next thing happens, I'll like get this under wraps. I'll start working out. I always had these big grand plans of like what the next thing that was going to help me was going to be. But in March of 2020, obviously, COVID happened, and I got laid off from this new and exciting job that I had just started. And I was in a new city where I didn't know anyone but my boyfriend and his family. But I took COVID very seriously. He did not. So that there was started to become some like fractures in that relationship even. And I felt very isolated and scared of the state of the world. And, I didn't know what to do about my drinking also. So this was when the drinking started to become all day, every day. So he worked on a farm. He would go out to the farm, and I would drink pretty much when I woke up. And then I would just like play video games or like watch shows or like try to start a project, but then fail because I got drunk. And then he would get home and, he started to really realize, like we all knew I loved to drink, but really realized it was maybe becoming a problem. So this gets worse and worse. I start experiencing what I don't know at the time is alcohol withdrawals in the morning. So I'm waking up covered in sweat, shaking, ill, and just I learned that the only thing that would help me is to drink more. So then I would, wake up, and as soon as I woke up, I would drink enough to get me to a place of like equilibrium where I could then walk to the liquor store and get more things to drink. And honestly, like at that time, the only thing that I clocked was wrong was like, I was like, he's judging me. And I wish he wasn't. But like, I loved alcohol. And like, something weird about addiction, I mean, any addicts watching this will know what I mean. But it's like, obviously, as I'm telling this story, that is is a terrible place to be, seemingly. But I loved alcohol so much, and I was physically, emotionally, psychologically, in every way you can be, addicted to it. So I didn't want to stop doing that. So I started being like, anything that's going to be in the way of me doing that is now a problem. And I've always been a person who I love, and I love connection, and I'll do anything for the people that I love. And that started to change because the disease of addiction started becoming higher up on the like survival hierarchy in my mind than anyone else, especially anyone who would stand in the way of me getting drunk, which sounds like so selfish, and it is, but at the same time, there's not an active choice being made. It was explained to me one time where it's like if you were in the desert with another person, and you had a water bottle, and it's been a few days, and you're saving this water bottle for when you actually need it and you think you're going to die of thirst. And this person steals your water bottle. You will do things that you never thought you were capable of to get that water bottle back. And that's, in an addict's mind, the substance, whatever it is placed that high up on the hierarchy of survival. And that's like how it felt. It wasn't like I was actively choosing to not care about people. It was just like, it was my survival. So that was where I was at mentally. And it came to a head one day when he just came to me and he said, listen, I'm going on a trip. And it's crazy because I don't really like remember the details because I was obviously hammered, but I only remember it through the lens of like how I experienced it. And so in my mind, he was like, I'm going on a trip. You need to figure this out. But I can't be here right now. I have to go. So we went on a road trip, and I remember being like, well, okay, bring me. Obviously, you're not going to leave me here alone. And he was like, no, obviously you can't come. Like, what? Which, like, in hindsight makes total sense. Why would you bring me? How was that going to work? But he left, and I took that as, a huge betrayal because I was like, I'm struggling. I'm like in the worst depression of my life, like, and you don't even fucking care, and da-da-da, like, I was so mad, and so, like, I just had never been an angry person, but I was so angry, and I was like, no one gets it, no one understands me, and so I was calling my family, like, drunk as hell, just crying and screaming and being, just so dramatic, and so my mom, unbeknownst to me, drove up from Dallas to Tulsa in the middle of the night, knocked on my door, and the next morning she said, we're going to Dallas. I have an appointment for you to talk to someone. And at this time, like, genuinely, even though it may sound crazy because of everything I just said, like, we didn't really think alcohol was the problem. We thought I was depressed and anxious and all these other things that I've dealt with my whole life. And so she was like, you need to drive your car back to Dallas with me so you can have your car when you're there. And I was like, hey, crazy thing though, I have not been driving in months because I can't, and I certainly can't drive 4 hours. And she was like, you need to have your car, so I'll drive behind you, like, whatever you need to do. If you need to pull over, throw up, like, that's what we're gonna do. So in the morning, when I'd sobered up but was in extreme withdrawal, we drove down to Dallas, and I stopped a bunch of times, throw up on the side of the road. Like, it was miserable. Anyways, we get to Dallas. I go to this appointment, and this lady is asking me, all the standard questions they ask you, what's your anxiety level? Are you thinking about doing anything to yourself? All these questions, whatever. Like, it's an hour-long assessment. And at the end, I think she's going to give me like a treatment plan that's like a therapist or something. And she was like, you are in severe withdrawal and you need to stay here and be admitted into the psych ward, essentially. That also was a detox. And I was like, hey, literally no. I was like, that's actually the funniest thing anyone's ever said to me. I will not be doing that. Thank you so much, though. And she was like, no, like, literally you could have a seizure. This is really dangerous. Like, you can't play around with this stuff. And I was like, still gonna be a no for me. I'm fine. Like, there's some misunderstanding. Like, I'm just sad and I'm drinking to make myself feel better. Like, that's all it is. So finally they're like, this isn't really an option. Like, this is our medical advice. And so my mom was like, you need to stay, whatever. So I was like, guys, okay, I will come back tomorrow, promise, but I need to go take care of some things. Obviously I did not have anything to take care of. I just wanted to drink again. So I get drunk again, and I come back the next morning, and I was admitted into a mental hospital / detox. And that was the first time that I was ever institutionalized for it. And I remember being in there and them explaining to me, like, you have a substance use disorder, you need to quit drinking. And I remember thinking, like, okay, I'll just quit drinking then. Like, once I had gotten a few days of sobriety and they'd weaned me off medically, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Obviously things aren't going well. I should stop drinking. I didn't think it would be forever. And I just thought that I would be able to do that. I did not know what I was up against. And 2 weeks later, after I got out, my mom woke me up because I was passed out on the floor at 2 p.m. and I just woke up and I said, I need help. I don't know what's going on, but I don't even know how I got drunk again. I don't understand what's happening. I really don't get it. And so I went back to the same place once again, then did like an IOP program, whatever. Also at this time, simultaneously, my boyfriend and I aren't really speaking at all. Cause like I was really hurt that he didn't call me when I was in the hospital, but obviously I'd like been ruining his life for many months. So I didn't have the like perspective to realize that that's what obviously his perspective was. Of course, I'm not going to call you. Like, anyways, so we were kind of like breaking things off. And I was living with my parents, which was not ideal for someone who's 24 years old. Anyways, so that all goes on. I think I went perhaps one more time. I just kept relapsing. This moral of the story. I just kept like trying really hard, getting maybe a month under my belt, relapsing, and then not being able to stop, and then going back to like a detox. And every single time I relapsed, it was really jarring because I would pick right back up where I left off. It wasn't like I had a few days of like good drinking. It was just immediately bad. And so then me and my boyfriend, he was going through a really hard time separately, and so we kind of like rekindled things. And I was like, honestly, this part of my life is a real big haze, but I have a lot of regrets about that time in my life because he needed me to be there, and I wanted desperately to be there for him, and I just couldn't be there in the way that I needed to be, because I just couldn't figure out sobriety. And I have, that has been something that has really taken a toll on me over the years, since made amends and all that great stuff. But anyway, so living with him, and then it's not working out and whatever, and I'm being a shithead like in every single way. So my brother, who has gone through similar things and he understood, he was like, hey, why don't you come stay with me for a while, and we'll figure it out. You don't need to be in Dallas right now. Like, it's just not a good place for you, whatever. So I drive to Colorado, and I like, okay, new place, new me, baby. That's what I'm doing. So I drive up and I live with him and his fiance, who's now my sister-in-law and one of my very best friends. And they were kind enough to take me into their home. I got another job. I got back into the design world, had a remote job, and then just couldn't stay sober. And I ended up lying to them and saying that I was going somewhere nearby, and I ended up hopping on a plane back to Oklahoma without telling anyone where I was going because I was hammered. And when I got to Oklahoma, nobody in Oklahoma wanted to see me because I was hammered. And so I basically posted up in a hotel room, and my mom had booked me it was like a train or a bus or something like that from Oklahoma back to Dallas, and I missed it because I was drunk, and I just was getting drunk and extending my stay at this hotel day after day after day, just drinking, passing out. My family's trying to get a hold of me. They can't get a hold of me. And I end up finally getting a flight back to Dallas, and that was when I agreed to go to rehab for the first time, because like full residential treatment, because I was like, I don't actually know like even where to begin on how to stay sober. Like I don't know. So I went to treatment in Waxahachie, Texas the first time, started to learn a little bit more about addiction as a disease and how it manifests in my life. And I really thought that like understanding and knowledge was going to be enough. And I started working in an AA program, but I wasn't down with amends yet. Didn't want to do that. So I was really half-assing it. Moved into a sober living in Dallas afterwards. Stayed sober for probably 2 months. And I, in that sober living, I got my dog, because I really thought like I'm turning it around. I went to rehab, like now it's when it changes. End up relapsing and taking an $800 Uber back to Tulsa, because I just kept getting drunk and being like, I want to go be around someone who like knows me, even though those people didn't want me around anymore. Anyway, so I take an $800 Uber to Tulsa, have a blast with the Uber driver. Just, and honestly, I might be getting like some of this confused timing wise, because I was just drunk so often that I'm not sure exactly where it goes, but I think this is the series of events. Anyways, I go back to Oklahoma, same thing, hotel, whatever. 2 of my friends from the first treatment center actually drove up to Tulsa and picked me up from the hotel room that I was just getting drunk every single night in Tulsa, and they took me directly back down to the same rehab. So this time I go to rehab again, and now I'm learning like, okay, maybe there's a little bit more surrender that needs to be happening here. And I really thought that I had it, but I didn't understand, which is crazy because if you notice like the plane and the Uber, like there's obviously an element of codependency going strong here. And that's the part that I was missing this time. But I got out and I moved down to Austin, and I lived in an Oxford house, which if you don't know what Oxford is, it is a program all across the country where it's like self-governing sober homes that are pretty affordable to live at, but they're not like like sober living, like privatized things. It's like a whole nationwide thing. Anyways, I live in an Oxford house with my dog, got my dog back, and I meet a man, and I start dating a man who's also in recovery, and I'm dating him I stayed sober for 5 months this time, so I'm dating him for 3 months maybe. Seems like longer than that. I'm not sure. Some amount of time. And he ends up relapsing and then getting sober again. And then I end up relapsing and getting sober again. And then we cut things off. But basically what I had done is I had gotten out, I'd started to work the steps, again, didn't want to do the amends, so kind of gave up on that. I replaced the alcohol with a person. That relationship and the newness of it was making me feel really good for a period of time. And then when that faded away, and I was left with myself again, I got drunk. So that kind of started this cycle, or really highlighted this cycle that I was in, where it was like sober, something related to a man, relapse, sober, something related to a man, relapse. So from January to April of 2022, this was probably emotionally the darkest time for me, because I kept relapsing, and then I started to do a detox hop, which was like I'd relapse for 2 weeks, I'd go to detox, I'd get out, I'd stay sober for 2 weeks, relapse, and so on and so forth. And so I went to detox between January and April 3 times that year. And my sister was getting married in May, and in April, I was like, I don't know what happened, but I obviously relapsed again. And I told myself, I was like, okay, well, I know what they do in detox. They give you meds to wean you off physically. So I'll just find that on the street, like, and do it myself so that my family doesn't know that I'm having to detox, and then I'll get sober, and then I'll go to her wedding, and I'll be the maid of honor in her wedding. As you can imagine, this is not how that took place. I ended up getting something that I thought was a detox medication, illegally on the street, and I took it to detox. It ended up, later on, I found out it was only fentanyl. There was no actual, like, the thing that I thought it was in there. And so I, like, passed out for an undisclosed amount of time. I woke up, the cops are at my door doing a wellness check. My family had put 2 and 2 together and realized I wasn't doing well. And, one thing led to another, and I inevitably am like, okay, I'm going to go to detox again, because I obviously can't do this. And that's when I got to detox. That's when they told me that I didn't even have any benzos in my system at all. It was only fentanyl. So I was really scared at that point, because I was like, I just could have died. But I was like, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to detox. I'm going to get out. I'll have plenty of time to make it to the wedding. That'll be that. It'll be great. What I failed to mention earlier is I'd already missed my brother's wedding because I was in rehab the first or second time. I can't remember because they were the same place, whatever. So I was like, I can't miss my sister's wedding. I've already missed one family wedding. Like, I can't do it. And so I'm in detox, and I make a plan to call my mom to tell her, like, okay, I'm going to do IOP, intensive outpatient, when I get out of detox. And, like, that's what's going to be different this time, is I'm going to do, like, an extended IOP program. And I go to the counselor, and I tell her I'm going to call my mom and say that. She's like, great, we've got your mom on the line. So I pick up the phone. I'm like, hey, Mom, I'm going to do IOP, whatever. And then I hear this guy's voice, and it was Josh, who's the guy I talked to who helped me get into the detox. He was like the admissions person. And he goes, hey, Bridget, I've got your whole family on the line, and they'd like to talk to you. And I was like, Josh, is this a fucking ambush right now? And I was so mad at him. I was so mean to him. Josh, if you're out there, I am really sorry. I really did take out everything on you, and I feel really bad about it. That's on me, brother. So my whole family's on the phone, and basically it's an intervention of like, hey, obviously you can't come to the wedding. This is not good, and we need you to go to treatment again, and get better, and have a chance at life. And on this phone call, my sister said something to me that really changed my life, because I was crying, and I was telling her, like, I can't miss your wedding. I can't miss another thing in this family. Like, I'm such an outcast from this family. And she said, Bridget, it's just a day. It's a day in my life. But I want you to be there for all the other days. When I have my kids, I want you to be their aunt, and I want you to be there. And right now, I don't think you're going to be there. Like, we don't think you're going to survive this if you keep doing what you're doing. And so I agreed to go to treatment from detox. And that's when I went to my last treatment center. And I had, in that time, I asked a counselor, I said, what's going to be different this time? I've relapsed more times than I can count. It keeps getting worse. I prayed to God that I wouldn't wake up so many times in the last 3 months. Like, how is this ever going to get better? I always feel confident, and then I always relapse. What am I going to do? And she said, And this seems like so obvious, but she said, this is just going to be the time when you never do this again. Everybody has a time where they just make the decision that this is the last one. And then no matter what you think, no matter what you feel, no matter what state of mind you're in, it doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is that you don't drink. And so you're allowed to think anything you want to think. You're allowed to feel anything you want to feel, but you do not drink no matter what. And you do whatever it takes to stay there. You take every suggestion of people who've done it longer and more successfully than you have. Like, you take their advice, you listen to it, and you do whatever it takes to do anything that you can to not drink. And something about that, coupled with the fact that I had just almost died of an overdose, coupled with the fact of missing both of my siblings' wedding, missing my grandpa and my grandma's funerals, destroying my family. Like, I put the people that I love most in this world, I put every single one of them through hell for 2 years. I just, they tried so many things, and I was the only one who had the power to do anything about it. And like, there were times when I remember thinking, like, I must be a sociopath because I keep doing this, and like, I see how hurt they are and I can't stop, and I don't know what's wrong with me. Like, I literally thought that I had somehow become, like, gone from a person who cares more about the people that I love than, like, to a person who actively is, like, making decisions that just break each and every one of their hearts. It was a really dark time of, like, basically I made a decision where I said to myself, like, I can't keep doing this, and so I'm gonna give it my 100% best shot and see if they're right. See if the sober fucking annoying people who are always like, keep going one day at a time, it works if you work it, like, let's just see. I don't think they're going to be right. I think that I'm different. I think that I'm worse off, and I think that it's not going to work for me, but I'll try it. I'll give it a full college try, hardest I can. And then when I inevitably can't, then I'll just end it. And that was genuinely what I felt. I was like, I'm going to try my absolute hardest. I don't think it's going to work. And when it doesn't, I'm just going to take myself out of the race. And much to my surprise, those people were right. And the first 6 months were so hard because you're remedying. How do I take accountability and equally give myself grace in that this is a disease and at some point I lost the power of choice? How can I do both of those things? Because if I live in this place of shame, I will never stay sober because it's simply too much to bear. Figuring that out, and a big part of my recovery was so in that last treatment center, I actually started dating an employee of the treatment center, which is really frowned upon and terrible in every way. I thought it was a good move for me. It was not. It was not a good move. He ended up getting fired. I ended up getting kicked out of the IOP program. That relationship ended up being pretty psychologically and emotionally and mentally and spiritually abusive. It was really short-lived and really intense and really terrible. But it was one of the best things that ever happened to me, because after I was able to leave that situation, I did not want a man to speak to me for a very long time. And it was the first time that I was simultaneously getting sober and making an agreement with myself that I was going to stay single. And that was huge for me, to not replace the substance with a person. Even though I tried, I just failed because it was so bad. And honestly, like, someone was protecting me by sending me that situation that made me not even want to speak to a man. It really helped. And then I stayed single for 2 years after that, which was the longest I had ever been, ever since I started dating when I was like 15. Anyways, and I figured out in that 2 years, I figured out exactly who I was. I figured out how to live soberly. I figured out what I wanted my life to be about. The kind of person I wanted to be. I rediscovered things that I loved to do as a child. I started my TikTok, and my TikTok was so helpful for me in the first few years, especially just having a community of people was huge. And in April of this year, I celebrated three years. And there are so many stories within that are my war stories, basically, that if we sat here and talked about all of them, we'd be here for days. But the reality is, like, that's my journey, and my alcoholism was such that I couldn't it wasn't going to be sustainable, and it wasn't going to be something where like liver disease was going to kill me in 30 years. It was something that I was going to kill. It was going to happen soon, and if things didn't change, it was absolutely, that was next on the list. And I didn't have to, I learned that it didn't have to be that way. And so the number one miracle is, of course, that I'm sober, and I have over 3 years of sobriety now. But honestly, the bigger miracle is that my whole life, before I drank, since I was born, before everything got bad, my whole life, I was crippled by fear and depression and just a general sense of non-belonging. Recovery granted me sobriety, and it also granted me freedom from that. Now, I probably still skew a little bit more anxious as a human being, but I have the perspective that going through addiction for years gave me, and the process of recovery. I worked in an AA program, but many people do different things. The process of recovering, it helps you with the reason that you drank. There's nothing about it that stops you from drinking. It helps the reason you felt the need to drink in the first place, and that was my fear and my sadness and my otherness that I felt my whole life. And that's the miracle, like, genuinely, is that I'm able to be the person that I am today that I never was before. If you knew me before 2022, no, you didn't. Like, you did not know me. It's really funny because my now boyfriend, one of the first things that he said to me when we met was like how positive I was. And I remember thinking, I've never been called positive in my life. Like, if anything, I used to be the most negative person you'd ever meet, because I would constantly be thinking like worst case scenarios. But that's not who I am anymore. And my whole point in like sharing this story is that, I think sometimes in society we have this view of what we think an alcoholic looks like and what their story looks like, and, what sobriety looks like. And I think it's just different for everyone. And I wanted to, if the counselor that I had in treatment that said those things to me, I looked at her and I said, that's who I could be in the future. If I try my hardest, maybe I can be like her. And if I could be that for one person, to be someone who looks for the similarities in my story and not the differences, and believes that maybe it's possible for them too, like, that's what it's all about for me. Because I owe everything I have to the people who were brave enough to share their stories with me, because I didn't believe that I was in the same category. I just thought like, oh, that's so great for you guys, but you don't understand how hard it is for me. Turns out they did. They actually literally did. I just didn't believe it, because it was so hard for me to stay sober that I was like, I actually don't think anyone could be actually sober who's as bad as an alcoholic as me. Turns out, yes, that is the case. I just hadn't reached the level of desperation that I needed to find the real recovery that I needed to find in order to stay sober. So I probably left out literally at least 1,000 things, but that's, you know, that's my story, and I'll tell you a million other stories in amidst that story as time goes on in this podcast. But I wanted to just kind of get, share and, so you guys could get to know me a little bit of like what my story is. I want to say, if anyone's watching, I want to say a shout out to that counselor in my last treatment center who said those things that really changed my life completely. I want to say to my family, if it wasn't for you and your belief in me and your never giving up on me and showing me tough love when I needed it and showing me compassion when I needed it, literally I would not be in this position. I don't think I would be alive without what they did for me. And to my friends now, and like my boyfriend and everyone in my life now who continues to show up for me and, do things in their life to account for me and like my sobriety, and the support of me and like my pursuing, my little dreams. You're also the reason that I continue to go on in this way. And to my dog, you have literally seen me at my worst. And you still look at me just the same with the same amount of love in your eyes. And I love you more than anything. And to myself, there is no one stronger than the version of me that stood in detox on day 1 of the last time I got sober. There is no version of me that is stronger than that person who made the decision that they were going to really try. It's easy for me to look back and hate that version of myself, but she's the reason that this version of me exists. And she only existed because of all the other people I just mentioned. But, and to a power greater than me, dude. For me, that is just the universe and how things are interconnected. And, it's not religious in nature, but it is just something that I felt so profoundly at my darkest moments and as I was recovering. The unspoken spirit that lives in this universe that showed me the path when I couldn't see what it was. There's something there, and I don't know what it is, but I figured out that I really don't need to know what it is. I know what I don't think it is, but I don't really know. I just know that something pushed me in certain directions, and it is the reason I'm here today. So, also, anyone who's followed me on TikTok, you are also the reason, and I love you so much. So, that's my story. So let's do some segments real quick and kind of lighten the mood. We're going to do Rock Bottom and Pink Cloud. So put up on the screen Rock Bottom and Pink Cloud intro slide. Okay, my rock bottom for the week. Let's think. What was it? Oh, I'm really poor. Yeah. That's going to probably be my rock bottom, until this podcast takes off. We're manifesting that. My pink cloud of the week is that I have some really exciting news about the podcast. We are going to be moving into an actual real studio space in July, which is really exciting. And that has been absolutely getting me through this week. So that's rock bottom and pink cloud. What is my too sober for this of the week? Too sober for this, the state of the world. Sometimes I look around and I'm like, wow, I am truly God's strongest soldier for being sober in amidst this hellhole. But anyways, so next week we're going to have on a really special guest who, I'll just go ahead and tease it. It's my best friend. My best friend has seen me in my drinking days and in my non-drinking days, and we're going to get her perspective on a lot of things as a non-addict and a non-alcoholic, but one who loves one. And I'm really excited for you guys to meet her because she's the best. And then I've also got some guests coming up that are fellow sober TikTokers. So drop in the comments who you think they are and who you want me to get as guests. Also, please subscribe, because that's like how I will ever make money from this. So I'd be really grateful for that. And also in the comments, please let me know if any time in the month of June you have a sobriety birthday, so that maybe next episode could be dedicated to you. These milestones could be, a week, a day, 17 years. It doesn't matter the duration at all. We would just want to celebrate you. I really, really appreciate you guys for listening to my story. It means the world to me, and I'm really excited to move into the studio and make this podcast like a real deal official thing. I love you, my Bernies. Is that what we're going to call it? Someone drop in the comments what you should be called. I don't think Bernie is good. Bernie Sanders? I don't know. We'll figure it out. But anyways, sobriety is not boring, and neither am I. Bye.